Hello and welcome. It is Jane Austen July. It has been a really good Jane Austen July so far. I read Jane Austen's bookshelf, which is, wow, incredible. I really, really love when we get to enjoy credible works of like just masterpiece. I have previously read Frances Burney's Evelina. I read it last year and it was so good. And then 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I read Lover's Vows when I read Mansfield Park for the first time. So I guess that was 3 years ago. And also fantastic. So I knew it was probably in good hands, but it was really remarkable. I loved the way that she looked at the biography of all of these women who came before Jane Austen, who were on her bookshelf, but are primarily lost to history, lost to the canon, and she investigates why they were taken from the canon, especially since many of them were in the canon way after Jane Austen when Jane Austen wasn't. Jane Austen became much more popular in like the 1870s and kind of that era going on, when many of these women remained in the canon until, the 1830s or kind of that era. So yeah, it was really lovely just to read about these women, to kind of get a biography about them and then get that biography of their afterlives. That was so fun. I love the ways that publishing and how people are perceived over time, like it's so cool and so interesting. So that was probably my favorite part. And I also just love learning about these books, and I've already picked up The Mysteries of Udolpho and started reading it. I like had it on a potentiality for this year, but I was like, it's so large. And I did the same thing that the author talked about, how we often disgrace these books and being like, well, are they really that good? And why wouldn't they be good? We sometimes view really, really old books as not as good. We have that preference for modernness in some ways. And then different books that are like really in the canon, we think that they have to be amazing because they're old. And some books are bad because they're old, and some books are good because they're old. But like Jane Austen had pretty good taste, so I'm enjoying it so far. It's quite early. I'm listening to an audio, so I'm also getting situated with all of that. But yeah, it's been really good. I read Jane Austen's bookshelf, 5 out of 5 stars, amazing. I began The Mysteries of Udolpho, and then I'm pivoting a little bit from Jane Austen and reading My Friends by Fredrik Backman. And Fredrik Backman has been one of my favorite authors for a number of years now, but this book has my soul in a really, really strong way. So I am going to just leisurely read it, but also I want to consume it completely. So yeah, that is where I am. I think it's the 8th of July. I meant to be more on time with this vlog. I meant to be more on time with my pile of possibilities, but it's that time of year where everything's a little kind of like, So I will hopefully come and chat to you about books, about Jane Austen, biographies, contemporaries, all of that stuff, and then, the other books that I read during this month as well. And yeah, I hope you have a fun time joining me on this journey. Jane Austen July is going great. I have started A Life in Small Things, the real Jane Austen. Just epic. I'm really, really enjoying it. So yeah, I love Jane Austen. I love biographies. It's going well. It's been a fantastic July so far. I am currently dressed up because I am coming home late at night from a murder mystery party where I wanted to be the murderer, of course, but instead I got murdered. I was a mob boss. It was really fantastic to be a mob boss and to be hated by everyone and to have killed everyone. It was great. So a lot of people wanted to kill me in return. And then I got to be a ghost that sat in the corner and made snarky comments. It was fantastic. However, I have not been reading like a ton of Jane Austen. I listened to Her Life in Small Things, which was amazing. And then I started The Genius of Jane Austen. I'm Nanny, so it's really beautiful because I got to just have a sleeping baby on me and just begin that book. One thing that I have been doing is going through the African trilogy. So I finished Things Fall Apart in June and I liked it. I felt kind of middle of the road. And then I read No Longer at Ease. What a great title. What a great epitaph that explains the title, and then also the book, really, really fantastic. Looking at corruption, the ways that you're caught between cultures, and the ways that it's about this man who goes from Nigeria to England in the late 1950s, and then he comes back to Nigeria and is alienated partly from his culture and also just all of the elements of that. And he returns and he's just kind of caught, and part of the epigraph that explains the quote is like, that there's like another death because you're caught between this world and you are no longer at ease in the country you're from. And originally the poem is from T.S. Eliot about the Magi returning after seeing Christ, but it's such an interesting metaphor. Wonderful book. Really, really loved it. And then I have started Era of God, which is the third book, which kind of returns back to the tradition of
the first book being set in a small town and like culture and different influences of people that practice like traditional religion versus those who practice Christianity. And yeah, it is a storyline that is like probably a little bit less, it's less intriguing for me because it's less focused on one character and more focused on like a town and a village, and it does have perspective, but again, it has an older man as one of the my primary characters, and we don't see a ton of his like heart, and it makes it harder for me to like fully feel like, oh, this is a person I'm invested in their story, rather than the second story, which was following a guy in, returning from university age 26 and like looking at these different things, which is closer to my age and like closer to experiences. And also just both of them are like more casual about like, and then I beat that wife, and I'm like, whoa, okay. Which like I know that he's not necessarily affirming that, this is a good idea. It's just like very like low key when you're trying to like understand and resonate with this character, and then they're just like casually mentioning violence against women, and you're like, okay. It is one of those things where like it has been harder for me in the first and third book to relate to the characters, which I know is not the end all and be all, especially when we're talking about the second book, which is about a man who has been very westernized by his experiences. So there's probably interesting things we can mine for nuance in how I enjoy those stories. But yeah, I am struggling a little bit with the third one. It's talking about these guys who are building a road and being disrespectful and getting drunk, which I guess those are kind of relatable things. I've never been drunk, but I've experienced those things. That is my check-in for Jane Austen July. We're getting near the end of the month. It's the 19th.
Hello, it is July 30th. We have just over 24 hours left of July. Have I abandoned most of my Jane Austen July plans? Yes. It is mostly in name. Although I did read 2 kind of biographies. I read, A Life in Small Things, which was excellent, and I read Jane Austen's bookshelf, and I reread Emma, which was delightful. I read it on audio. It was a short reread, but it was delightful. Emma is my favorite Jane Austen book, and yeah, I don't think I didn't spend a lot of time savoring in it and like thinking about it a lot, but it was just wonderful to be in the story. And I love Emma. I love the supporting cast. Frank is great. Jane is great. Knightley, Miss Bates, all the things. I loved Katie's video on Miss Bates this year. And yeah, it has been a good Jane Austen July. And yeah, I was hoping to read The Mysteries of Udolpho, but I just got carried around with other things, and it's 30 some hours long, so I was like, okay, I'm not gonna have time to finish the book, so I kind of gave up. But it has been a good month generally. I did not expect to kind of finish the African trilogy, but I did. And the third book, I wish I liked it more. Like, I wish I was more invested in a high priest in a small village in the 1920s, but it just doesn't pull me. And yeah, but it did make me really want to read Nigerian literature. I read some before, but I haven't read a ton. And I kind of just looked at the narrator, and I looked at what other books he had narrated, and I found Every Day a Thief by Teju. I'm not sure if I'm saying his name right before. I realized I've never really said it before, and now I'm saying it in a video, which is the perfect time to say it for the first time. But yes, he is an author that I have taken out Tremors before, and I've seen this book before. And yeah, so I've been familiar with him for a while, but I haven't read his books. But I'm thankful to read this. This takes place in 2007, and it so far hits on some similar themes about bribery and about corruption and about returning after many years. I really liked it began with him in New York, and he's just like trying to get a money orders in order to get a passport, and he's just going through the things. Now that we're in Nigeria, in Lagos specifically, it's like less interesting. It's like, it feels, some people have said that it feels like a travel log and not really like a narrative piece of fiction where he's developing and growing and stuff. And I feel that at the beginning I was like, I was invested because he was talking about going home and like all of these things. But now we're in Nigeria, not a ton of stuff is happening, although he did see a woman on a bus reading Michael Adache, and I was like, that's so cool. I meant to read him this year because on December 31st last year I read a Year of Last Things, which is his poetry collection that he released recently, and it was really excellent. And I've had The English Patient on loan for a little bit, and then I keep on not getting it from the library. It keeps on coming up as available, and I'm like, next time. Michael Adache is actually one of only 3 authors that are Canadian that have won the Booker Prize, which is interesting. He ran up for The English Patient in 1992, I think. I do want to read Michael Adache's novels, and this was another reason. I was like, I was thinking about him this week, and then he came up in this. So yeah, that is kind of where my reading journey went this month. I started with Jane Austen, and I somehow went on to wanting to read Nigerian literature from different ages, because that's the vibe. That's the joy of being a mood reader. Like, I can never make plans because I just kind of, I curve, and I really wanted to do like a video about like some various books I haven't finished and like finishing them. And then I was thinking about, you know, I really want to start War and Peace, and then the Booker Prize came out, so now I want to do that. I'm just like, I'm unable to stay focused, you know? But hopefully that's why you're here and you enjoy my interesting eccentricities, because yeah. But other things that I have been reading. I have been reading Practicing the Way by John Mark Comer, which is a Christian nonfiction book about just practicing the way. Like, it's about kind of reintegrating Jesus into our lives rather than kind of just viewing him as someone who's like cool. You know what I mean? Like chill, but like how does it actually mean to like live the way that Jesus lived, and like actually letting that be something that integrates in your life. So that is good. I've heard recommendations for this book before. I'm not hugely into it, but I would like to kind of finish it, I think, on audio, because it's not very long and I'm nannying tomorrow, and the only way that I get the girl that I need to sleep is by walking around while she's on the stroller. So I don't like want to listen to music or have headphones in when I'm like, you know, playing with her. But if I'm just walking around in a stroller trying to make her sleep so that I'm not talking to her, because if talking would keep her awake. So I feel justified in listening to an audiobook while I do that. So yeah, I will do that tomorrow. And then yeah, I'm almost done Every Day a Thief. It's a very short book, so I think I'm about halfway through it ish. So yeah, enjoying that. And then the other book that I'm reading, this is a book that I started last year and I just recently picked back up, but it's Sounding of the Seasons by Malcolm Guite. I think he is an English lay person who is an Anglican, and these are poems. And in the beginning, he talked about how he kind of began them because poetry used to be very corporal. It used to be very communal in the way that it is. Like, you know, I think everything used to be more communal because literacy and stuff like that was just not widespread. So people came for community. You know, the Odyssey and the Iliad and all of these books were communal tales that were told. Fairy tales are communal tales that were told. So many things were verbal traditions, and we often downplay verbal traditions. But anyways, these are talking about psalms and sonnets and stuff like that that were used in Christian liturgy. I found out through here that O Come, Emmanuel was originally a poem, which I was like, wow, that's so beautiful. I love that song. Like, it's one of my favorite Christmas songs because I find it so beautiful. So it makes sense that it was initially poetry. And yeah, I'm really loving them. There's some of these poems that have really, really hit me. And I think I read the first few and the introduction kind of back in November of last year, but I kind of started at the beginning and started reading the poems again. And yeah, it was really beautiful. And on Monday, it's now Wednesday night, I got to go to an Orthodox nunnery, which was really cool. My church recently transitioned from being Pentecostal to being Anglican, but charismatic Anglican, which was an interesting transition. But we really wanted to be more rooted in tradition and in kind of the church fathers in the early church. So that's been kind of a process over the last like 4-ish years. And yeah, it was interesting to see a more traditional expression of faith. Our church is still very modern in the way that it incorporates tradition, but wants to practice more of those things. So it was very interesting. And yeah, just to talk to a nun and talk about her experience and stuff like that. And yeah, there's definitely differences in the way that we see different elements, but it was really cool to just have that. And yeah, I didn't get to like, because it closed after a little bit, I didn't get to like spend as much time on the grounds. I was hoping me and 2 of my friends went on a little road trip because it was about an hour and a half away. But yeah, I really had wanted to just spend time, you know, with God. So the day leading up to it was when I picked it back up and I started the John Mark Comer book as well. So yeah, I had talked about at the beginning of the year how I wanted to kind of spend more time reading Christian books, because for a long time I didn't read a ton of Christian books because I grew up in a sect of Christianity that was very kind of anti-world and very like, you know, you don't want to expose yourself to anything. And I was like, I don't believe that. I believe that there's beauty across the world, and I don't think that we have to be so sheltered. However, I think in that I became kind of afraid, and also a lot of Christian media can be a little cringy, but I was never a person who faith ever diluted. Like, I have always been very, very passionate in my faith, and it's always been a huge, huge part of my life. But I've never read a ton in it. Like, I went through for theology, so I read a lot about it, and I wrote essays and, you know, all of those things on it.
But in regards to like kind of the more general books rather than the more educational books or like theory books, I've never read a ton of those. And I will admit I did not read all of my books that I had to read in school. But yeah. And also I think that it's an interesting perspective of being a Christian in the world, because I understand, understandably, why a lot of people get a little bit of ick when it comes to Christianity, because sometimes Christians are, you know, there just to convert you. So I always feel a little weird talking about Christianity and Christian books on my channel, because I don't want people to feel like I'm being one of those Christians. But also, like, I like talking about God, and God is like my favorite thing and the most central aspect of my life. Like, I realized I just kind of naturally started talking about our transition and stuff, and like I am, you know, one of the leaders in my church, and that's a huge, like, the biggest part of my life outside of this channel is, you know, my work within the Christian community. It's the biggest passion in my life, but I like never mention it on here because I always feel like it's going to be weird. So I want to be less afraid to incorporate the parts of my life that really matter. And yeah, I think people know my heart. And yeah, I remember one time, probably about 6 years ago, I mentioned vaguely, it was a vlog, and I mentioned that I went to prayer because on Wednesdays my church has morning prayer, and someone just went off on me in the comments and started talking about why I was like a horrible person who no logical person could ever believe in God. And I was like, okay, I mentioned that I went to church. So I think things like that kind of made me a little bit afraid, but I want to be a little more brave in just, yeah, talking about things in my life that are really important. I ended up in a huge tangent about religion, which was definitely not the point of this, but you know, who knows? I might check in again to talk about the end of Everyday a Thief or to wrap up the month, but this also might just be the end. So in that case, I hope you had a wonderful July, and I will see you in August.